So this meeting will be recorded, and we're going through the neighborhood traffic communication for Kingsdale redevelopment. So we get started here. We're actually going to start off with our Assistant City Engineer, Kyle Hoying. He oversees a lot of development from the engineering side and infrastructure side. So he's going to give you a brief overview of the development.
Thank you, Jackie. First off, we understand a lot of you are familiar with the proposed Kingsdale mixed-use development, but we wanted to take this opportunity to give a brief overview of what is being proposed with this project. On Monday, October 19th, the Upper Arlington Board of Zoning and Planning passed with conditional approval the preliminary development plan for the Kingsdale mixed-use development. The preliminary development plan application includes the proposed redevelopment of the former Macy's department store site into a walkable mixed-use development with the potential for a city's community center. Proposed at this time are 3 buildings. The first one along Tremont Road there in the northwest portion of the project is a senior housing building that will have approximately 104 units. Attached to that senior housing building is a standalone 6,000 square foot ground floor restaurant. The second building along Northwest Boulevard is, you'll see kind of like an O or an 8 shaped building. That building will house 363 apartment units. The third building in the southwest corner of the development, right now there's 2 options with that building. The first option that you see in front of you includes a community center and around 50,000 square feet of office space. If the community center is not located in that building, instead of the community center, there would be an additional 75 apartment units and only 30,000 square feet of office space. We wanted to present to you tonight the community center because, as many of you are aware, traffic is a big concern with this development, and the community center will generate more traffic than the apartments and office space. So we have asked the developer to look at the traffic impact study as it relates to having the community center in that third building. The conceptual master plan in front of you right now is the original development plan. Since the original submittal, many of you are aware that Council has opened up the floor to hear residents' concerns regarding this development. And the developer has been sitting in on those recent council sessions, and he's been listening to the concerns of everyone. This week, the developer has actually indicated to the city that they are looking at making some modifications to the development in an effort to decrease traffic and lower the height of the apartment building along Northwest Boulevard. These modifications include cutting the top story of the apartment building along Northwest Boulevard in half, just the top story. And then the other, I guess, by lowering the apartment building by half a story, that would decrease the apartment units by approximately 36 units for the apartment building along Northwest Boulevard. The second modification includes adding a floor to the senior living building along Tremont Road. And with that floor, they would add approximately 20 senior living units or memory care units. So this is good news. It shows that the developer is definitely listening and trying to work with the neighboring residents in the city. I mentioned earlier about the conditional approval that the developer has received for this project. One of the conditions is that a traffic impact study is approved by the city engineer prior to them even being able to submit for a final development plan. So I will, at this time, turn it back over to Director Thiel, and she can explain a little bit more of what all goes into getting a traffic impact study approved.
Thank you, Kyle. So for you that Some of you that had watched the council meeting, this slide would look familiar, but I just kind of wanted to walk through what happens when the city gets a development plan. So sometimes they require a traffic impact study. Obviously, in this case, larger developments, it required a traffic impact study. So Carpenter Marty Transportation Consultants conducted that study. Before they could even get started, the city does require a memorandum of understanding so that we agree on what is going to be studied in the area that's going to be studied, and that had to be approved. And then they also have to get approved the trip generations. So how many vehicle trips this proposed development is going to generate based on the Institute of Transportation Engineers specifications. And then the engineering division reviews that and approves that before they can get started. Additionally, besides just our engineering staff reviewing the traffic impact study, we did hire a third party to help us review that, Burgess and Nyepel, just to ensure that all the calculations and all of the background information was done correctly. And that is still ongoing, and our review is still ongoing. So we're providing comments back and forth right now. That final approval, like Kyle said, is to be determined, but to be done before the final development plan goes before BZAP. So when we look at the traffic study that was done, this is the area that was studied by their traffic study by Carpenter Marty, and traffic counts were taken, and trip generations, like I said, so vehicle trips were generated. Obviously, we're in the middle of a pandemic, so that has a major impact on traffic. So we had traffic counts from January of 2020 at our 5 Points intersection of Tremont and Northwest. So we were able to take those traffic counts and compare them to the traffic counts that they got in August. And we applied adjustment factors. So we scaled up all of the traffic counts that were collected based on that to meet what is typical traffic, not pandemic traffic. So we look at opening year, which is proposed at 2022, and then we look at horizon year 2032, so 10 years out. And with that horizon year, we look at a growth rate for the traffic, which is provided to us by the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission based on historic data, traffic data for Upper Arlington, and that's 0.5%. And like we said, we're always looking at worst case scenarios with traffic impact studies. So we're looking at those peak hours. So in the morning, the peak hour is 7:30 to 8:30 a.m. That's when the most people are moving in the mornings, going to work or to school or whatever their daily activities are. And then we also look at an evening peak, which in Upper Arlington is about 4:30 to 5:30 p.m. And that's when the most people are coming home from their daily activities each day. So when we look at the peak hours review of traffic, this is to show you, this is trips generated. So I don't want to get into too much data, but I just wanted to show you, this looks at the AM and PM trips generated. And like Kyle said, we are looking at worst case scenario. And you can see that a community center actually generates more trips than just an apartment. And that's why we're looking at this with the community center in the mix. And you can see the total trips generated by that. So this table is for the peak hours of 7:30 to 8:30, and then PM 4:30 to 5:30. So the report, is very long, lots of data in there. But when we look at this at our busiest intersection in the area, which is Tremont, Fisher, and Northwest, we look at what our existing trips are there. So in the mornings, we have about 2,600 vehicles going through that intersection in that morning hour. And then in our evening peak, we have about 2,700 vehicles going through that intersection. So when we look at trips generated, in the morning, we have about 161 going through this intersection in the morning additional, and then in the evening about 186. So when we compare that increase, we're looking at about a 6% increase in the mornings and a 7% increase in the evenings through this intersection. So when we're looking at what's come out of the traffic impact study so far for recommended improvements, I know there's a lot of information on this exhibit, but there's a circle up here showing, the 5 points intersection I just talked about. And it does show that we're going to need to add a new right turn lane on Fishinger. So that's eastbound right turn lane on Fishinger. And then extending the existing turn lanes when you're southbound on Tremont for left-hand and right turn movements. Additionally, we'll have fiber installed on Tremont from Fishinger to Zollinger. So that will be a required improvement so that all of these signals can talk to each other. As if you see here at Ridgecliff, there's a new signal proposed for this main entrance into the new development. And so we want all of these signals to be able to talk to each other and coordinate the corridor similar to what we do on Lane Avenue. On Lane Avenue, we do that wirelessly, and in this case, we're looking at doing it through fiber. It's a little bit more reliable. And then additionally, so if you know the Ridgecliff Road at Tremont intersection now, we have a pedestrian median island there. So it kind of adds a buffer for when you're crossing the street there, that you have pedestrian refuge island. So since we're putting a signal there, we're going to lose that pedestrian refuge island there. Still a good crossing though, because it's signalized. So we want to add an additional crossing up here to match what's at Ridgecliff now with a pedestrian refuge island. So that will be a requirement to be installed. Coming around, timing changes will be required at Zollinger and Northwest. And then relocating that current signal on Northwest Boulevard when you enter the Giant Eagle now. So that signal will be relocated approximately 65 feet south. And that just gives us a perpendicular entrance into the new development. And then you can see here at Trentwood, we just have, that circle doesn't mean that there's a traffic circle going there. That just means traffic calming to be determined. And that's what we're here tonight about. So when we look at the neighborhood, adjacent to this proposed development, you can see the green dashed lines. That's where we are looking that the cars should be going. Those are our major collectors and arterials in Upper Arlington. And that's where we want vehicular traffic to use to access our commercial area. So when we look at Tremont Road, our average daily vehicles are about 8,000 vehicles per day. And the capacity of Tremont Road is about 15,000 vehicles. So we have plenty of capacity there. And then similarly on Northwest and Fishinger, we have plenty of capacity. So what we want to prevent is as much traffic entering this neighborhood as we can. And I just highlighted, the yellow here is obviously very important. We look at, the new high school entrance here. While we look at the high school, we don't expect that traffic pattern to change. And I'll show you why in a little bit. But we do see that connection around there. So I had mentioned earlier that we did do a neighborhood traffic study, and we put out traffic counters on Trentwood Road, Brandon Road, Mount Holyoke, Kirkley, and Bembridge Road. And this was most important to give us a base point of where we are today, and look at, what the speeds are today and what our average daily traffic count is today. So when I was mentioning Tremont Road, 8,000 vehicles per day, Northwest is a little bit higher. And then you look at the average vehicles per day on a residential street, it's obviously a lot different. On Trentwood and Mount Holyoke, obviously we're seeing the most vehicles per day. And that's, obviously when you look at this neighborhood, Trentwood and Mount Holyoke are probably like our major residential streets in that. And then the others are minor residential streets. So that makes sense that they have a higher traffic volume. Um, concerning areas are obviously the 85th percentile speed we collect with our traffic counts. And that shows us what 85% of the vehicles are traveling. And so I have stars right now next to westbound Trentwood and northbound Mount Holyoke. And I'm sure many of you have seen those speed radar signs that we put out around the town. They show you your traveling speed. And so we are going to be putting our speed radar signs up in those two locations in early December, because we've identified those as, those are above our threshold of what we like to see. And then we'll be working with police as well and letting them know that we have those speed radar signs up there. What you may have noticed around town with our speed radar signs is we like to put them up for about 3 months at a time, and then we start moving them. And that's because with the studies that we've done, we found that they're most effective when we keep moving them. So if you just leave them in place for a very long time, not as effective. The only permanent one that we have is in front of Tremont Elementary as a constant reminder of vehicle speeds when they're traveling in front of that school. So looking at, we also, with our traffic study that we did, we pulled the crash data in the neighborhood for the last 5 years. And so I know, again, there's a lot going on this map. But you can see intersection crashes within the last 5 years. There's 14 in this area that's surrounded by red. You can see the highest was here at Trentwood and North Star. And so when we have our CIP project in 2022, we definitely want to look at that intersection to see, take a detailed look at those crash reports and what exactly is going on and what improvements we can make to make that a little safer if we're having sight distance issues or if it's turning or whatever it is. Looking at rear end crashes, most of those are on Fishinger here, and you can see that those are probably vehicles turning into the neighborhood. Side swipes are when there's a vehicle parked and the vehicle gets sideswiped. And then we had a couple driveway exits. So a vehicle was exiting the driveway and was hit by a vehicle on the road. So looking at that over a 5-year period, it's not, there's nothing alarming about it, but some areas that we can look at. And I know a question that I get is, well, I know an accident happened on my road wherever, but keep in mind that what I look at is what's reported to police. So I always tell everyone that, it's not only important to report a crash to the police for insurance needs, but also so that we can track crash trends. So that's important to get that data. So I know everyone wanted to look at existing parking restrictions. So you can see that right now in the neighborhood, we have it pretty open. There's minimal parking restrictions. And that's something that we want to talk about tonight, and we're going to have a poll on that. Looking at high school parking, this is the site plan for the new high school. So the yellow stars show the parking lots, and you can see this is a parking lot off of Mount Holyoke. This is a parking lot off Brandon Road, and this is a small parking lot off of Zollinger. So, the site still has the same use as it did before when it was a high school. So like I said, we don't expect traffic to change going to or from the school. Now, what we do see is that we know that the main entrance is up here. So if we have overflow parking, it may shift from south of the high school to north of the high school, but we are trying to mitigate that. So as many of you know, the high school has a carpooling program that has been very successful, where to get a parking pass on site of the high school in one of these parking lots, you have to submit a carpool plan, and you get so many points for each person that you commit to bring to school each day, which helps cut down the number of vehicles going to and from the high school. Additionally, their proposed parking lots are adding 9 additional spaces from what they were at before, but the city is going to be installing angled parking on Brandon Road next year, so on the side of Brandon closest to the high school, and that adds about 46 additional spaces. And then we're going to try to add parallel parking on Zollinger on the south side adjacent to the school, which adds about 30 spaces. So all in all, we're looking at about 85 additional spaces, which can really have a big impact when you're looking at if that parking was on neighborhood streets. So talking about the development parking a little bit, if any of you saw the council meeting, Chad Gibson, our community development director, went over this. But just a quick run through. So our code is a maximum allowed of parking spots. So the maximum this site is allowed to have of the new development is 1,037 spaces. They are providing 897 spaces. From what our development department has looked at, they're expecting less than a demand of 700 vehicles per any hour in a 24-hour period. And some of that's due to some shared parking that's possible. So something to keep in mind that we are still looking for in the traffic impact study is they're going to be doing an examination of parking on what the site can handle, and if there's any overflow parking, what they expect to do with that. And then also to show us their commitment of those 150 available parking spots that's shared with the Giant Eagle Market District. So I've talked a lot already, and I apologize for that. But I kind of wanted to get everyone with some background data and let you know everything that we've done. So now we get to go interactive. So we talked a little bit about the parking restrictions, and I'm going to launch a poll here. So, nope, that's not the right poll. I apologize. Let me launch the right poll. Okay, so when we're looking at the current parking restrictions, and I showed you the map, it's pretty wide open. How do you feel about the current parking restrictions in your neighborhood? So we have an option for more restrictions are needed. We prefer less restrictions because the residents need this on-street parking for themselves and guests. No changes, but you want us to maybe look at a smart parking permit solution for residents. So I think some of you may be familiar with parking passes that have been done in other communities or around a college or something. And we're not thinking that residents are going to have a pass in their car, but more of thinking of a smart solution where maybe license plates are registered and we have a way of looking at that. So that would be something we would look into. And then the last option there is we're good the way they are, don't make any changes right now. And when you're thinking about this too, when we look at, I know the high school obviously brings a lot of us like, oh no, what's going to happen? But we always hate to put in blanket restrictions until we have a problem that we're solving. And that's something that I think that I've worked well with other streets in the past where we kind of get some feedback from the road and see what people are thinking and whether we need to put a restriction in or not. So that's something that we can always work on if we have an area that becomes a problem too. So I'm just going to give the poll a little bit more time. Looks like about 64 or 65 of 89 have voted so far. I know some of you on the phone may not be able to vote, and I apologize. If you want to put anything in the chat box or send us an email, feel free to do that. Okay. I'm going to end the poll if everyone's okay with that, so that we can review the results together. Okay, so our question was, how do you feel about the current parking restrictions in your neighborhood? And it looks like we don't really, looking at this as a whole with you guys, we've got about a third of the way split. So we can definitely say no one wants less restrictions. Okay, there's really not much less we can do. I get that. About a third of us think more restrictions are needed. About a third of us think we should look at a smart parking permit solution. And about a third of us think that we are good the way we are, so don't make any changes. So that tells me that most of us at least have some concerns about parking, and that we need to keep an eye on it. I think that we can definitely explore what smart parking permit solutions may be available. It definitely tells me that we need to keep an eye on things. Maybe we don't need to go in with blanket restrictions, but we need to keep a close eye on this and make sure that we're working together on any restrictions needed. So that is just, one of the feedback tools that we're using tonight. It doesn't mean that we're making decisions on any of this. It just kind of gives us all a chance to look at data together and see how the whole neighborhood as a whole is feeling. Okay, so I know I told you guys I was going to present some ideas just to get us thinking. And so when I've looked at this, you can see the map I'm showing you. The red lines show where we have existing sidewalk. You can see that there's no sidewalk in this block. Someone in the city told me that maybe it's because there was a deed restriction on sidewalks when this area was developed. I don't know exactly, but that sounds, since there's none here at all, that sounds like it may be the reason. The yellow line here on North Star Road is an upcoming CIP project. So in 2022, we are resurfacing North Star Road. And that's when I told you we need to look at this intersection of Trentwood and North Star Road. That could be a possible traffic calming solution, and look at the intersection to see if there's anything we can do to reduce any crashes. But also, we're going to be installing sidewalk on one side of the street with that project. So that sidewalk will go from Fishinger down to Zollinger on North Star Road. So looking at other things, and I'm going to go through these one by one after we go through the overview here. But a possible idea is sidewalk on Trentwood on the north side here. I put it on the north side for us to look at. There's more right-of-way, city right-of-way on the north side than the south side. And the more city right-of-way that gives us, we're able to add a tree lawn between the road and the sidewalk and plant street trees, which also has a traffic calming effect. Looking at a possible traffic calming solution here at Trentwood. I'm going to show you a possible traffic calming solution at Brandon down here. And then I'm going to show you something from Mount Holyoke and Trentwood here. So for Brandon at Zollinger, I know many of you have asked me, what are we finding that works good? What are we finding that people don't like? The traffic circle idea that has one tree in the middle, I get a lot of complaints about that. In the past, we had gotten complaints about the chicanes that are near Lane Avenue. So we're trying to find different solutions that work, but also are aesthetically pleasing. and don't impact your daily commute as much because you become used to it. But Brandon and Zollinger, we're kind of calling these neighborhood transition zones. So these tell people, hey, I'm entering a neighborhood. If I don't belong in this neighborhood, maybe I shouldn't be entering, or at the very minimal, I need to be going slow. So there's a couple options for this. The one here that's big is showing, a crossing here and then a pedestrian refuge island, and we could have landscaping on either side of that. What we are doing for our Lane Avenue corridor for neighborhood transitions is what you see in the bottom right-hand corner here. So, there's not sidewalk on Brandon, but if you could imagine this with, the landscape median here, which is about 10 foot wide and 20 foot long, and then showing the crosswalk so that it stands out and just brings awareness of this is a different area that I'm entering here. And I know many of you have asked me about sidewalk on Brandon Road, and I did look at it. What we get into on Brandon is there is a beautiful tree lawn there with very mature trees. And I don't want our traffic calming solutions to become a controversial neighborhood problem. And what I found is when we have a lot of tree impacts because of a new sidewalk, that becomes a very controversial project. And so that's why I'm not showing or proposing any recommendations for sidewalk on Brandon. It doesn't mean they can never be done in the future. And there's always the city sidewalk petition process, where if you get 60% of support on a block, the city will contribute 50% of the cost to install those sidewalks. But I think that that's something that would need a lot more work because of the impacts to all those trees. So northwest at Trentwood is another area we said we were going to look at for traffic calming from that map I showed you a few slides ago. So again, we have two aesthetic looking options just so you can see what's out there. You can see that this shows the sidewalk on the north side of Trentwood, and then it shows curb extension or bump out islands here with 20 foot wide there. And then there's the crosswalk here. And additionally, we're showing a crosswalk across Northwest. If we put this crosswalk in, I would imagine that would be push button activated beacons, like what we have at Tremont Elementary in the library crossing the Tremont Center. Those have been very effective in our community and make for a safe crossing. And then obviously it shows the street trees being planted between the sidewalk and the curb here, and this adding street trees on the south side there. So this gives you an idea of two different looks that we can look at. And then Trentwood at Mount Holyoke. Nobody freaked because I showed a circle there and just throwing out ideas. But I think that, when you look at the neighborhood as a whole, this is a very center point for your neighborhood. You have people coming off of Fishinger, you possibly have people coming north on Mount Holyoke from the high school, and then we have our Trentwood crossing. So I think that this would be a great location for a mini roundabout. So think something similar in size to what we have at Tremont and Reading. And then we may have to look at options for how to make this just a little bit bigger. So that we can get something really aesthetically pleasing and landscaped in the middle. That's not just a single tree. We want to make it a little bit bigger than that and make it more of that mini roundabout feel. And then this shows that sidewalk on the north side with the crossing here and then the street trees. So, what this does for you is, like I said, anybody coming off Fisher, coming up Mount Holyoke, going across on Trentwood, this really, makes it that this isn't a really easy pass. You have this really aesthetically pleasing island here. You have to go around it. It makes people slow down. And I think it would be a really nice addition to the neighborhood. So it's something at least worth looking at as an option for you guys. So back to the polls. I have another poll. Let me get it pulled up here. So launching the poll. Here we go. All right. When we are looking at the possible traffic calming solutions, which do you prefer? So we have neighborhood transitions entering Trentwood Road at Brandon Road, the installation of a mini roundabout on Trentwood out Mount Holyoke, the installation of sidewalks on the north side of Trentwood, all of the above, or no traffic calming. We don't like that idea. And looking at this, maybe I should have made it so that we can select more than one, but it still gives us an idea of, do we like the idea of traffic calming or do we not? And please know that this is just to get us all thinking and looking at the same things. I'm going to have the same kind of poll when we look at traffic restrictions. So I think I've mentioned to many of you, we think about, do we want to influence driver behavior and restrict our own access as neighbors, or do we want to just cut off access? Then we don't have that access either, but nobody else does. So, influencing it is the traffic calming methods that we're looking at. But we will go to traffic restrictions in these upcoming slides. So I'll give you guys just a little bit more time to vote, and then I will share this poll so we can all see what we're thinking. Okay, so we have about 71 of 91 attendees. So I'm going to end the poll so we can all look, and sharing results. So we see that, that people are interested in that neighborhood transitioning, and they're entering Trentwood Road and Brandon Road. A couple people like the idea of a mini roundabout, a couple for installation of sidewalks. Most of us, if we're going to do something, let's do it. We like all of these options. Like the more traffic calming, the better, what that tells me. And then there's just a few of us that don't like traffic calming. And maybe we'll see that that's because they prefer looking at traffic restrictions. But I think that this is good because it shows all of us on this meeting that we're at least open to exploring traffic calming more and what solutions can come of that. So moving on. Okay, so I told you we were going to talk about traffic restrictions. So one of the ideas and recommendations I wanted to show you was how we could look at one-way traffic on Trentwood Road. We would make this one way between Brandon and Northwest. So that means that you can only exit Trentwood onto Northwest. You can't not enter Trentwood off of Northwest. So that means that you're going Fishinger or going down to Zollinger, because Trentwood is the only access point between Fishinger and Zollinger for this neighborhood. And now I want to do another poll because, there's looking at this as one way, or there's a possibility that we could look at closing it and what impacts that would have. So I just want us to look at that together with a poll. Okay, so when looking at possible traffic restrictions, which do you prefer? So one-way traffic westbound on Trentwood from Brandon, I'm moving this so you can all see. The closure of Trentwood Road with no access to Northwest or no access restrictions. So I would say one thing with access restrictions is if we go down that road, that's where we will focus on as ways to provide those restrictions. And we would not go down the path of traffic calming as much. But we are open to either. We just kind of want to get a feel for what the neighborhood's feeling with this. I hope everyone's enjoying the polls, at least making it a little bit more fun than just listening to me talk. And I want to hear all of you talk too when we're done, whoever wants to talk about new ideas or other things that we haven't covered. So I appreciate all of your time and being part of these polls. I think that they're a good way for us to look at how each other are all feeling too. Okay, so it looks like we have about the same number of responses as we have on the other polls. So I'm going to end the poll so we can share the results. Okay, so looking at the results, if we're looking at possible traffic restrictions, which do you prefer? So we have about 30% that like that one-way traffic idea from between Brandon and Northwest on Trentwood. The most what people like is the closure of Trentwood with no access to Northwest. And then about the same as the one-way traffic is no access restrictions. So that tells us that, you know, 40% of us like the idea of closing it off, and about 70% of us like the idea of restricting access at least in some way. So that's something that we need to keep looking at then. And then we have one more poll that I want to do here. And this kind of gives us how we feel about access restrictions to residents versus traffic calming solutions. So let me get that poll up. Launching. Okay, so this poll says, how do you feel about access restrictions for residents versus traffic calming solutions? One option is that we prefer traffic calming solutions that maintain the current access. We prefer converting traffic to one way or to close Trentwood to restrict access to the neighborhood. And then that last option is that we don't really want to see any change to our neighborhood. Give it just a few more seconds here. We're almost near the total number of participants that have been using the poll. Okay, I'm going to share the results. Okay, so when we look at the results, it looks like we are, of course, split 50-50. How do you guys do this? How is that possible? So half of us prefer traffic calming, half of us prefer reducing access. So, and there's a couple of us that really don't want to see any change. So what you're telling me is you want a little mixture of both. So maybe that tells me that when I come back to you, I'm looking closer at, maybe that one-way restriction with a little bit of traffic calming here or there. Um, so I appreciate the feedback. I feel like this is always how polls go. Like we get split, and um, we look at everything then. So thank you very much. So this is concerns we know. I show this slide because I appreciate all of the time that you have all spent and letting us know your thoughts. I know many of you have spent many hours at council meetings as well, and I know that's a lot of time in your evening, so we appreciate that. I appreciate all the emails we've received. I even received a letter from a child in the neighborhood today, so I appreciate that. And I'm definitely taking that all in, absorbing it, reviewing it with my staff, reviewing it with third-party traffic consultant. And so the things that we've heard here are, we don't want an increase in cut-through traffic. We're worried about high school traffic. We don't have sidewalks. We don't have enough crosswalks. We're worried about speeding. We're worried about accidents. We're worried about pedestrian safety, parking. And we want more signs, and whether that's stop signs or speed limit signs. And so what we want to do now is open it up. So I'm going to let Kyle introduce this part.
Thanks, Jackie. Before anyone hops off, we just want to remind everyone again to send Mandy DeSanto their email address. Jackie, if you want to hop back to that first slide that shows Mandy's email address.
Yep.
Just in case some people came on late and don't have it yet. So we will be sending out, we're gonna get to a question and answer session here soon, but we will be sending out kind of a frequently asked questions sheet, hopefully by the end of next week. So if there's any one of you who would prefer to send a question or a comment via email instead of tonight in the Zoom meeting, feel free to email Mandy, and everyone who sends her an email to be attached on this email list will receive the frequently asked question document that we put together next week. Hey, Jackie, before we get into the comments, one of the hot button items on the chat has to do with speed bumps.
Yep.
Are you able to talk a little bit about speed bumps and if that's a possibility in this neighborhood, or what we might be able to do outside of speed bumps?
Yeah, so something you might notice in Upper Arlington is in all of our public roadways, we don't have any speed bumps. So it has been Upper Arlington's policy not to install speed bumps. We find that they actually do more bad than they do good. Not only is it harder for our maintenance crews clearing the streets and emergency vehicle access, but it also becomes an annoyance for neighbors because what you find is people slowing down, going over the hump, and then pressing the pedal to the metal and gassing it after they get over that bump, or it causes a lot of vibrations in vehicles. So I did spend time at the city of Columbus before coming to Upper Arlington about 7.5 years ago. And that was a constant complaint I got from residents on roads that we did have speed bumps. And I was glad to see when I got to Upper Arlington, we don't have those. So we look at other ways to mitigate traffic than those. But that's a great question. I appreciate it.
Hey, Jackie, someone proposed the question about the amount of trips anticipated. They asked, why are there 363 apartment units, but only 100 trips generated because of that?
So when we're looking at this table, that's because we are looking at the peak hour. So we don't expect everybody to be leaving their apartment within the same hour, and we don't expect everybody to come home within the same hour. So when you're doing traffic modeling, you try to get, like I said, that worst case scenario of what you think the most vehicles coming and going from the site is during those peak hours. So that's what you're looking at here, not the total trips generated in a whole day.
Another question asked about the difference between, and I guess more importantly, the effectiveness between stop signs and small traffic circles at intersections.
Mm-hmm. So through studies and experiences, we in traffic engineering have found, and that's why you see so many roundabouts going in now, that roundabouts are safer. Even the big roundabouts that you see accidents either being the same or going up just slightly, the intensity of those crashes is way down. The severity of those crashes is way down, where you're not seeing the injuries or deaths. You're maybe seeing a little property damage. And so that's why roundabouts have become so popular across the country recently. And it's pretty easy for someone to run a stop sign or roll through a stop sign. And so putting those in unwarranted is actually more unsafe. And then what we found with traffic circles is you can't just roll it. You have to at least yield, and you're slowing down to make that movement around the circle.
All right, Jackie, looks like Suzanne Russell is raising her hand to ask a question. So Suzanne, I am going to allow you to talk here. Suzanne, are you able to speak? Looks like there's an error that popped up that says Suzanne Russell is using an older version of Zoom. So Suzanne, if you're able to type in your question by chance, we'll ask that here shortly. Sorry about that.
Are you able to unmute her, Kyle?
I am.
Oh, and it's not working. Okay.
There's an error. Yeah, it talks about an older version.
Okay.
All right. Next up, I will have Dennis Carney join in. Dennis, are you able to talk now?
Yes, thank you. I'm concerned a little bit about parking on Trentwood and some of the side streets if the development goes through. How do you propose to prevent that for Thanksgiving dinner, where everyone in the complex invites their family over? What happens in that case?
Thanks, Dennis. I appreciate your time tonight, and thanks for your question. Yeah, so we know that there's going to be a special event here and there that's going to impact traffic, and that happens community wide. But obviously, when we find a problem, we want to work with you guys on a solution. I know that there may be someone on the call that worked with me in the past. We had some issues with high school football games. So we did some restrictions around that. And we've done some various restrictions based on time because of something that was happened. So like I said, I don't like to throw out blanket restrictions that impact your everyday life as a resident there, but I do want to continue to work with you guys on any future mitigation that we need to do. So I hope that helps.
All right, next up is Megan Schiavone. Megan, I am allowing you to talk now, so go ahead.
Hi, this is Megan. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Megan.
Hi. Thank you for acknowledging Kaylee's letter. She was really excited to write that. I appreciate everything that you have talked about today. So thank you again for your time. Mm-hmm. The traffic calming, I'm very happy with everything that you've suggested. I do have one question about Mount Holyoke. being considered for sidewalks. That is a very heavily trafficked road, and you saw with the speed, our children cannot walk or ride their bikes on that road. I would highly recommend considering doing sidewalks on that road as well, because that is a connector from Fishinger to Zollander right to the high school. In addition to traffic calming circle, whatever is best suited at Mount Holyoke and Kirkley.
Yeah.
We just see it, that's like a really, especially when school is full session, obviously not right now.
Right.
I just wanted to make sure that that is not overlooked, because I feel like Trentwood, yes, has just as much traffic, if not more than Mount Holyoke, but Mount Holyoke, I feel like the speed and the usability to Fishinger to Zollander, we see a lot of traffic there. So I would love to see sidewalks. And then just one note, I did drive around today, south and east of the high school.
Mhm.
Not only do all of those side streets have sidewalks, but they all have the no parking from 8 to 4. So I would like to consider that also for our neighborhood, because the high school students will definitely be using Kirkley, Mount Holyoke, all the roads close by to park.
Yeah,
So those are just some of my suggestions. And again, I love that what you had put together. I just think there's some other additional things that we can consider. And I know that there's a lot of other people that have the same interests.
Yeah, so I heard take a closer look at sidewalks for Mount Holyoke and see if that's something that's feasible. And then obviously we know that parking is, a big concern for all of you. And so, I want to make that commitment with you that once we see a problem, there's no reason that if we're all on board, as far as what residents on that street want, that we can't look at parking restrictions as well. And Kyle's familiar with that process. He's helped a lot with it in the past, where we get resident input on each street and look at it individually. So
Okay. And I honestly, the traffic from the 5 home football games at night doesn't really seem to bother us on Kirkley, at least myself. But every day having the students park on our street, I really wouldn't enjoy that.
Right. Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right, is Justin Bramall still on? I'll let him talk next. Justin, I think you might need to unmute yourself first.
Hi there, and this is Taryn Bramall. I apologize, his wife. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm on his laptop. So I wanted to follow up a little bit on what Megan said. I live at 3134 Mount Holyoke. We are right in the middle of that stretch between Zollander and Fishinger. And, seeing that average speed of 40 miles per hour, I don't think surprised any of, or at least myself or my neighbors, but it is very terrifying to see as a mom. And we have close to 20 elementary age or younger children living on just Mount Holyoke Road alone between Zollander and Fishinger. And kind of to Megan's point, looking at sidewalks, I think the traffic calming at Trentwood and Mount Holyoke is a fantastic idea, but I will tell you, people hit that accelerator between Trentwood and Zollander to get to the high school on time, which is going to, obviously increase even more with where the new high school is located at. So I just want to reiterate kind of what Megan said, looking at additional measures within that Mount Holyoke street, we would greatly appreciate it. And thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, next up is Ann Brusadin. Ann, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, I did.
Perfect.
Thanks so much for doing this for us tonight. We really appreciate it. I actually have 2 questions. I feel like Governor DeWine's press conference.
I know, I do too. Is anybody drinking wine right now? I'm kidding, sorry.
The first question is, what type of timing changes at Zollinger and Northwest are you anticipating? And the second question is, from your experience, would adding stop signs, I should have said I live on Trentwood, and
Okay.
yes, it does get super busy and people go fast. So would adding stop signs on Trentwood at Bembridge and Wareham help deter cut-through traffic, because it would make it more inconvenient for people using our street as a cut-through? Thank you.
Yep. So the intersection of Northwest at Zollinger, and I'm sorry, I have dogs. The traffic signal there right now is split phase timing. So what that means is that one direction of travel goes, the other direction of travel goes, and we don't have overlapping left-hand turns. So we're going to look at what we can do to that intersection so that we don't have to have all the split phasing operated, and make it run more efficiently. So there's not such a delay at that traffic signal. And then the other part of your question.
Stop signs on Bembridge.
Stop signs, thank you. So stop signs, I think I mentioned this a little bit, but stop signs, we have to have them warranted by the federal standards. So we are happy to do traffic counts. I can tell you from the traffic counts we got, additional stop signs are based on volume of two intersecting streets, or crash history. So you have to have more than 5 crashes in an intersection in a year to look at additional improvements. But we are happy to look at those as they're needed. I think there's something that we all feel like if we just put in a bunch of stop signs, people don't speed, but it actually makes it less safe, because the second you get a few people starting to run those stop signs, then we've got T-bone crashes, which are the most dangerous crashes that we can get. So that's why we really try not to put in unwarranted stop signs, because we don't want to make a bigger problem than there is. But I get speeding's a big problem too. So that's why we have to look at ways to slow people down. So thank you.
All right, next up is Andrew Broderick.
Yeah, hey, thank you very much. I just wanted to comment real quick that it seems to me that there's, 3 main problems with the neighborhood from a traffic and parking perspective. And it's obviously the cut-throughs on Mount Holyoke, the cut-through on Trentwood, and, the high school situation on Kirkley. I think that kind of what the neighborhood has been communicating through the city council meetings is that they want all of these things fixed, not just 1 or 2. And I think Jackie mentioned that, if you close off the Trentwood and Northwest, that's all you're going to do. And I just think that that's kind of underwhelming, considering that there's a lot of big issues here, with the high school, with the development, on top of 25 years of traffic problems in the neighborhood. So I just would ask that the city pay attention and fix all of the problems at once, including if they solve one problem, not to just shift it down to another street. And that's all I really had to say. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that comment, and asking us to take a broader look. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, next up is Sean O'Neill.
Hi, how are you today?
Good, how are you?
I'm great, thank you for asking me. I just wanted to speak to North Star and Trentwood. We're of 3092 Edgefield currently, formerly of 3165 North Star Road, which is right there at the northwest corner of Trentwood and North Star. I would say that something should be done there to mitigate traffic sooner rather than later. Our front yard was obviously on North Star, which we never thought that we'd be able to use, but the side yard on Trentwood, we didn't feel safe having our kids there ever, which this was all part of the reason that we ended up moving. Also, I don't know, I've witnessed several accidents. I've seen cars go into my neighbor's yard on, I think, 2 occasions. Well, they're no longer my neighbors, but yeah. Also, I'm trying to think. I don't know. And in addition to the actual collisions, there were numerous times where we'd be sitting in our living room and you'd hear horns and screeching, and you look out and there'd be cars come to a complete stop, narrowly missing an accident. That happened a lot. So that number 9, I guess it was, over the last 5 years could be significantly higher with a little bit less luck, I suppose. Now, I guess I also wanted to ask something about your scaling factors. Are your scaling factors the same for the traffic at like 5 points and the traffic going through like Trentwood and stuff like that?
So the traffic numbers I showed you for all the neighborhood streets are what we've collected during the pandemic. I did not put an increase factor on those. So my goal with that was, obviously I want to look at speeding now, look at crashes now, get a good feel for traffic volume now, and then we can continue to monitor that. So, you know, post pandemic, because obviously the development, if it goes forward, isn't going in anytime soon. It's going to take years for it to be built. So we'll get a chance to look at it post pandemic, hopefully. Hopefully we're near the end of this and coming out of the woods, and get a follow-up traffic counts too, so that we have a good starting point and we can look at where any increases are, or any changes that we need to examine further. So
I guess, yeah, I was just gonna say, I feel like the during pandemic traffic has probably been along like Trentwood and the cut throughs has probably been affected more than those on the main thoroughfares, because this is anecdotal, but I find myself not needing to use my normal traffic tricks, I guess, and just staying on main routes right now. So yeah, I don't know. I will stop rambling now. I appreciate
thank you
it.
so much. We appreciate you being here.
All right, next up is Terry Flanagan.
Hi there. I'm new to Upper Arlington. I've only been here about 5 years, but we live one house off of Trentwood and 1 block off of North Star Road. People come through Trentwood like it's the Indy 500. And I guess for myself, as much as I do hate them, roundabouts seem to be the best way for slowing down traffic. Stop signs don't work. As a teenager, as an adult, young and stupid, I've blown through my share of stop signs. Now I'm older and hopefully I've gotten wiser. Either way, the kids from the high school have got to learn. That's why I advocate somewhere a roundabout on Mount Holyoke. And so I seriously want to see a roundabout on North Star as it approaches either at Trentwood or at Fishing Earth. And that's pretty much, I'm an advocate of roundabouts. Make use of them. They do work. It's a matter of deterrence. You want to deter the teenage kids from speeding and through a residential area where children are. Please. That's pretty much all I got to say.
Good, very good points. Thank you for your time. We appreciate you being here.
All right, next up is Matthew McDonald.
Good evening. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk tonight. I was a little bit concerned about the discussion of one-way streets on Trentwood. I live at the corner of Trentwood and North Star. And I feel like depending on which way the one-way goes, it's going to funnel all the traffic to one direction. So for instance, if you have it going towards North Star, then we're going to see an increased amount of traffic, or vice versa, the other end of the street will see an increased amount of traffic going towards Northwest. Would there be some type of traffic study done or some type of impact study done prior to a decision like that being made? Because I just feel like if all the cars are going to be funneled one direction, there's going to be certain areas that are going to see an increase in traffic. While it might decrease in some places, it will surely increase in others.
Yeah, obviously the less of a grid that we get with less access, the more bottlenecks we create, because we are eliminating a route that vehicles can go, so they have to go somewhere else. So potentially we can create bottlenecks, but obviously our goal is to divert that traffic to the major collectors. So before we would do anything like that, we would definitely study what impacts there would be to traffic. And if we saw anything alarming, we would let you know why we don't feel that's good to go that way. But we would study that before. Thank you.
All right, next up is Victor Siadi, and I apologize if I said that wrong.
You're fine. It's Victor Cinchetta here. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Sorry about that.
Perfect. No, you're fine. I appreciate everything you guys have done today and the ideas and the interactive polling. It's very much appreciative. So, and as you can see from the polling, the neighborhood is basically broken into anything east and west of Mount Holyoke. Mount Holyoke gets a ton of traffic. They're the main route down in between east and west. My family and I live on Trentwood Road, east of Mount Holyoke, closer to North Star, and the traffic that we see is cut through from 315. So they're avoiding that intersection at Kenny and Fishinger and that 5 Point intersection. So my question is, could there be a traffic study done on the east side of Mount Holyoke for Trentwood to get an idea of traffic and speeds and things like that? Also, I guess more of a question, how come sidewalks only on one side of Trentwood and not both sides? And then the Trentwood closure, I think, would just force traffic onto Kirkley and Mount Holyoke. Anything that we're seeing that cuts through Trentwood and exits up at Northwest, I think would just zigzag through to the other streets. And I don't think that a closure would do us any good.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much for all your comments. And I think the one question I heard was about sidewalks and why we're only proposing them on one side of the street for Trentwood. Typically when the city comes in with a sidewalk project, typically we don't do them on strictly residential streets. We are looking at making an exception for this development. And when I look at Trentwood specifically, the right-of-way on the north side of Trentwood is wider than the right-of-way on the south side. So looking at putting in a nice tree lawn and street trees on both sides of the street so we get that traffic calming effect from the street trees. Obviously the sidewalk is so that we have pedestrian connections, but just looking at one side of the street so that we have additional funds to look at what we can do with traffic calming and everything else so we can spread out the projects as much as possible. So thank you.
All right, Jackie. Next up is Jim Mulhall.
Kyle, this is This is Dennis Carney. You unmuted me.
Whoops. I guess, Dennis, go ahead, and Jim, if you don't mind just waiting a second. Sorry about that.
We have a significant traffic problem already. I like some of what I've seen tonight, but I haven't seen anything that's going to dramatically resolve the problem or considerably reduce the problem. And yet we are still considering an incredibly large complex at the Macy's location that's going to have possibly 542 apartment units. The only thing that's going to help or eliminate an influx of additional problems is a much smaller development. I don't know that you can answer that question tonight, but from what I've seen and what we can do in one space that won't cause another problem in another space, I can't see it working with what we're proposing at Macy's. It just doesn't make sense.
Well, Dennis, I appreciate your comment, and obviously I'm here to facilitate our conversation and look at traffic calming solutions for all of you and what I can do to help you. I can tell you that, I've shared what I think the traffic increase is going to be from all the data that I've got, from the traffic counts we've got, from the third party we've got. And, we're looking at a 6 to 7% increase at our worst intersection. So I'm not seeing this as a huge change in what we have in traffic today. I'm not saying that we are not going to see an increase, but not dramatic. Like, we're not going like 50% more than what we have now. So it's a slight increase. But I think it's a really good opportunity for this neighborhood to start having traffic mitigation and start looking at sidewalk connections and those pedestrian and active transportation connections. So I think that this is a really good opportunity for the neighborhood to get things that sounds like they've wanted for many, many years now. And I'm hoping, my goal is to help facilitate that for you guys and turn these ideas into city projects. But thank you very much.
Sorry about that, Jim. Go ahead. Jim, are you still there?
Can you unmute me?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I was just going to say that we're introducing some major traffic additions into our neighborhood potentially. And I was wondering if the city of Upper Arlington had reconsidered the option of pursuing the A to Z connection again to try to alleviate that.
No, that is not something that has been discussed since I've been here. I know it was discussed previous to me, but it's not something that any community around us has reached out to me about, and is nothing that's in the works. And I think that it was pretty well squashed. The only thing that I have heard is a possible like pedestrian or bike connection through there. So just maybe a bike path or pedestrian walkway, which kind of exists to my understanding today. But I have not heard about any road connection.
All right, next up is Andrew Hoagie.
Hi guys, how you doing tonight?
Good, how are you?
Doing well, thank you. It's actually Hogue, but no problemo there. So I have a question that kind of depends on the answer, but when they were going through the high school planning process, we were kind of told by Imhoff that they were going to restrict parking on Mount Holyoke specifically by such a way as signs or whatnot, just due to the fact that if you change the main entrance to the high school to the north side of their block, you would automatically thereby cause traffic to pile up on our side. Given that we do not have sidewalks, can you confirm that that's going to happen? Because I feel like if you add parking on both sides of our street with no sidewalks, you're going to leave people with no choice other than to walk in the street, and given your 40-mile-an-hour speeds that you've seen, and I see a lot more, especially the cars that I'll step out in front of from time to time to remind to slow down. I'm wondering if you could answer that one for me, and then I do have another question.
Sure. So, like I said, I don't want to put in a blanket restriction, but any area that we see a problem, we will definitely come in, get with the people on that street and make any changes to those traffic restrictions that we need to. I know that many of these streets are in the traffic study from the high school that we continue to examine and keep an eye on. Like when you think about on-street parking, there's positive and negative. So the positive is when you have more on-street parking, you get the traffic calming effect. The negative is that you have all these people parking in front of your house. So looking at parking restrictions, I think one thing I would want you guys to at least think about is if we do find that we're getting high school students parking on your street, before we put a blanket restriction that there's no parking on the street at all, we may want to think about just one side of the street to have the benefits of getting some of that traffic calming, but not having both sides of the street completely lined with vehicles. So I'm going to be here to keep working with you guys on those issues as they come up. So I don't expect with the end of the pandemic to have a big, nothing's really going to change this spring, but next school year is when they'll be in the new building. And then that following spring, so spring's usually when we have the biggest parking problems, because that's when a lot of our sophomores are getting their license. So that's when we would be engaging with each other and seeing what we can do. And then you said you have another question, right?
Yeah, and I don't want a blanket closure, because I park on the street quite frequently when the kids are playing in the driveway. I actually strategically place vehicles on both sides of the street just to slow these people down, because it is quite ridiculous. However, I mean, just like on Northwest, how they have no parking from certain times, I think that would alleviate things. But the other thing would be, if you go and start closing access, you're just going to funnel that access into other places that are already so heavily traveled, being Mount Holyoke Road. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. You throw a roundabout in, and now instead of people coming to a stop before they make a left-hand turn, they're going to be winding around in a circle, and then people are just going to keep driving. I mean, I don't put much faith in the traveling public, having worked heavy highway projects for the last 13 years of my life. I know how stupid people are, and they're very stupid. So I think deterrence is really the only way to keep people out. And whether that means you make things one way to force people, or you just, you shut off access at the main arterial roads, you have to do something. But to just put roundabouts and make stuff look pretty it's fun to look at, but it doesn't provide any real solutions for the people that live in the neighborhood and deal with it daily. So that's all I have, but thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it. And I'm just sad that it took this giant development to get a little bit of attention on our neighborhood. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up is David Lee.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, coming in through loud and clear?
Yep.
Okay. Yes, to sort of piggyback on Dennis Carney's comment, because we don't see who's attending this meeting, I just want to make sure that it's in no way implicit having this meeting or having these discussions that we've accepted any amount of development over at Kingsdale. This is to me, just a completely independent subject of that. Of course, it'd be especially useful in the event that heavy development goes up there. So that's just one comment. I think probably most people feel that way.
Okay.
And, I think this meeting was valuable in that it was educational for me, at least, in that I got to see sort of the scale and the geometry of some of these structures. Because, like, for example, when I pictured a roundabout, I pictured a very large thing where, if I remember, like the one on North Star and Ashdown area, it seemed kind of wide, and I thought that would be maybe something like a structure that's impractical for Wakefield Forest, because I just envisioned people losing half of their front yard to accommodate such a structure. But it looks like some of these structures, at least size-wise, might be more manageable. That's just actually more a comment. Another comment, or maybe sort of partly a question, is I suppose, and I'm not sure there's a way to arrive at an agreement or consensus on this, but what might be just accepted as, routes that we would expect the high school students to use to get to high school. For example, Fishinger Road. I don't think it's really controversial that, any traffic being funneled onto Fishinger, an already very, very busy thoroughfare, is controversial. And I guess I assume that the people that live on Fishinger, just by the fact that they live on Fishinger, have already accepted that their front, street is very busy. I don't know what the feeling is about North Star and Mount Holyoke, because, I feel for the people on Mount Holyoke, but if you do measures that tends to, funnel traffic away from Mount Holyoke, you're going to potentially have North Star feel the impact of that. And, just so I think what might be helpful, and again, I don't know what consensus there might be other than that, well, Fishinger, is fine to funnel any amount of traffic onto Fishinger. Maybe something posted on the city website to where, okay, if we know of the routes that are expected to be the routes where high school students travel to and from the high school to their homes, we can maybe figure out some ground rules about just looking at a map more carefully now, especially now that we know maybe more about the, the size of these roundabouts and things, to just sort of carefully more think about, if you close this one thing or add a roundabout here, how that's all going to fit in together, if that makes sense. Because, I like the idea of, even though I don't live on Mount Holyoke, the idea of, reducing traffic on that road, it sounds great, but at the same time, I don't want it's not nice to have that all funneled to people on North Star Road. So anyway, that's all I had. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
All right, it looks like Dennis Carney has another question.
Actually, Kyle, I was done.
Oh, your hand was raised, so I thought you were asking to speak.
Oh, I'll put it down.
Thank you.
Not a problem. All right. Natalie? Are you
Hi,
there?
yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, I found a quiet spot. It's kind of a late night. So I had a few questions, and one revolves around the light on Kenny and Fishinger. And I know with UA that may be considered Columbus, but I used to work pre-pandemic on the other side of 315. So I currently live close to North Star on Trentwood, and I know the pattern of where people are cutting through. I live here, I was part of the cut through, and I know a huge problem is because of that intersection at Kenny and Fishinger. A lot of it is there is a long turning lane, but the arrow to turn left is very short. And when you do turn, you're also turning into oncoming traffic. So I was wondering if a traffic study could be there, if that's UA boundaries or if that falls into Columbus. So that's my first question. My second question is revolving around the sidewalks on Trentwood. And I'm sorry I'm out of breath. I came up from the basement and I'm pregnant, like no totally winded.
Yeah.
So the majority of our neighborhood is on the opposite side of that sidewalk. And so thinking about all the kids, which we currently have 3, there's a lot of them on our end of the street. They will have to cross the busy Trentwood Road to get on a sidewalk, to then cross back into the neighborhood or to go home. So I guess I just maybe need a little bit more reasoning behind that, because I'm thinking about the safety of all those walking dogs and kids. If they have to cross the busy street, that kind of mitigates the sidewalk. If the majority of the neighborhood is on the other side, and maybe I'm no expert, and Jackie, I told you that, so I just wanted to like voice that because it just doesn't make sense to me. Also, the last question is, I know that we had spoken before about the traffic studies that were done on the west side. Now, knowing that I live on the other side, and I know and I see, and I actually was part of the cut through traffic through the Columbus neighborhood, I think it'd be really interesting to compare that data first from our side to the other side, to be like, okay, where are they coming in from? Because you're going to see the highest amount of number, and then you're going to be like, okay, where does that traffic go? Does it go straight to Trentwood, or does it turn onto Mount Holyoke? So if that can be considered before all of this is approved, I think that it's a critical point that is missing right now, is that part of the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. So your first question was Kenny at Fishinger, and that is an Upper Arlington signal. And I actually had, I had reviewed the Google Doc that some of you may have seen. And we are going to be taking a lot of those questions and adding them to our frequently asked questions list that you will all get. But that was on that Google Doc. And so I answered that question, that we are going to have our electrical staff look at that. And they have looked at it. And we're going to be adding additional northbound left turn green time. So that should help with that turning movement. But, you know, if at any time you guys ever see any things like that, please feel free to reach out to the engineering division at any time, and we're happy to take a look at something for you. I know that when you live there, you're more of an expert than me, because I'm looking at the city as a whole, and you may be seeing something that we are not seeing. So we always appreciate extra eyes. Your second question was the Trentwood sidewalk, and that was, you know, just us looking at ideas. So I'm not saying that sidewalks going there, but, you know, just looking at ideas and quickly looking at it. I was looking at which side of the road we had the most right of way on. So city right of way, I need to have enough room to install a tree lawn and install a sidewalk. And so I think it's important when we're talking traffic calming that we get those street trees to help with the traffic calming effect. So that's why I showed it on that side of the street. And then the third question was why we didn't study any further east to see how traffic is coming in and out of the neighborhoods. And kind of just going back to the study that we looked at, you know, when I'm talking about average daily vehicles of 8,000 on Northwest, and Fishinger has about 18,000, you can see that our numbers on the neighborhood streets are obviously much lower than that. So we get cut through traffic, and obviously you can see from this data that Trentwood and Mount Holyoke have the highest amount. But a lot of this can be from what, you know, the neighborhood is doing as far as access of how most of you go in and out of your neighborhood from the other streets. And then, you know, obviously we're getting some cut through, but I'm not seeing any of these numbers alarming. I mean, it doesn't mean that I don't think that we need to control speeds, and we want to look at ways that we can make traffic calming on Trentwood and Mount Holyoke, and that's what we're here doing tonight. But I don't see anywhere that we need to say, oh my gosh, where is this coming from? So that, you know, just to try to give you some context, feel free, you know, to email us if I missed any of your questions there.
All right, Jackie, looks like Terry Flanagan has a question.
Yeah, yeah, there again, I'm somewhat new to Upper Arlington. I've only been here about 5 years, and I live at 3145 Edgefield. So I see all the kids. I'm retired, and so is my roommate. Our third roommate, she still works because she's younger. She's in her 50s, but I'm just saying that, I don't like uh, what is going up and down Trentwood. People around here walk, they walk their dogs, they walk their kids. We've got to figure out an acceptable way for this community and the city of Upper Arlington to agree how to mitigate the traffic on Trentwood and Mount Holyoke so that the children, as well as the residents, are not so much in danger. Like I said before, I'm not fond of roundabouts. I'm 69 years old. All they do is confuse me, but I'm getting there. I just worry about all the traffic up and down both Trentwood, Mount Holyoke, and now Kirkley. It's dangerous, and people fly up and down both of them. I don't think that a traffic light is going to solve it. You see traffic lights all up and down Northwest. You also see a buku bunch of traffic lights at 5 points, and they've got traffic lights all over the place. So with this addition of people, you've got a lot to figure out here. It's not just the amount of traffic that is going up and down Northwest, not the amount of traffic that is going up and down Trentwood. You've got a problem with the amount of traffic that is and parking that is going to be generated by this new development. You've already got a shopping center maxed out almost completely for the smaller and other businesses, not just Market District. You have a 5-story medical center that has nowhere near enough parking for it, nowhere near enough parking, which also punishes the other small businesses that are in the short strip that is near the medical center. Okay, you've got to come up with something for that.
Thanks, Terry.
So,
that's we hear you all, and that's what we're doing here tonight. So we appreciate your time.
All right, Jackie, we got a question from Karen Budd.
Hello.
Hi, Karen.
I thank you for allowing me to speak. I want to just echo the same sentiment as some of my neighbors regarding Trentwood Road sidewalks. Since a large majority of us live south of Trentwood, so I live on Wareham Road, for example, which is one of those smaller streets in between Mount Holyoke and North Star. We enjoy walking and biking and enjoy the pedestrian nature of the neighborhood, but from a safety standpoint, I think that it makes more sense for the sidewalks to also be on the south side, because we don't want to have to cross the street. Likely, of course, be much busier to go to the sidewalk, only to have to cross the street and encounter potential traffic again when coming back into the neighborhood. So I definitely think sidewalks need to be considered for both sides of Trentwood and also Mount Holyoke for sure.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, next up is David Lee. It looks like he's got another question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello. Okay, hey, yeah, I just had a really quick question for Jackie. Am I reading this right in that with respect to accepted routes for, or I mean like preferred routes for students to travel to and from the high school, North Star Road is much preferred over, say, Mount Holyoke. Am I safe in assuming that Mount Holyoke was never really meant to be like a preferred or even accepted route from students to go to the high school, that in fact North Star is actually actually, and kind of on topic, like were people on North Star Road also emailed, or physically mailed? I noticed some letters came. Were the people on North Star Road actually included in that mailing? Actually, that's sort of one kind of question. And then the other question is on some of these things, like I know that little what do you call that little calming station at Northwest Boulevard in Trentwood was proposed. By law, are we allowed to, say, include a sign right at the outside end of that saying residents only, no through traffic, even though that's not actually, if a violator came through there, they wouldn't necessarily be able to be cited if it's not actually illegal. But are we, is such a thing permitted, putting like a conspicuous sign saying residents only, no through traffic? Or does such a sign have to be actually something that's, the law per se?
Thanks, David. So your first question was about, preferred routes for high school students to live or to use when going to and from the high school. And, we have to realize that that's our high school for our community, and students are coming from all over Upper Arlington to attend the school. So, there's not preferred routes. It's wherever you live and the route that you need to take to get to the high school. So our high school is in a setting that's pretty much, in a neighborhood, as we are kind of just an oversized neighborhood in some ways with some commercial districts. So I hope that helps answer your question. I can give you, if you're interested, the street designations in Upper Arlington and what's considered our arterials, collectors, and residential streets, if that's helpful. And then your second question was if we can put signs up that say, residents only. And so we all have to realize that these are all public streets. And so I think that in the past, there was some communities that tried to do that. And unfortunately, they did end up getting sued. And, courts found that these are public streets. You can't limit who has access to them. And then, you already mentioned that it comes to an enforcement issue as well. So I appreciate your questions, though.
Jackie, looks like those are all the questions we have. Do you want to kind of maybe mention next steps and where we go from here?
Yeah, so I want you to all know that, we recorded this presentation, so it will be available. We'll also make sure that we put the slides of the presentation. We'll send those out with the frequently asked questions, and we'll have those available on our website, along with all of the poll results. And so we're going to utilize the chat that we saw tonight and try to address any more frequently asked questions with that. Feel free to email Mandy. And then basically all the information I showed you tonight, we'll email it to you or it'll be available on the city website. And then following steps are, we heard a lot of things tonight, and you all had very good points, and we appreciate you all coming together, and I'm hopeful that the chat box was helpful to you all. I couldn't see it while we were going, but I will review it after this. And I appreciate everyone's group effort and understanding that we can work together to make some of these improvements. So I want to absorb all this in, take some time to look at the data, and then I want to come back to all of you with some recommendations to look at and do some kind of format like this again. So if you want to give us any feedback of how this felt to you and any changes you want to see for more public involvement, I'm happy to get that feedback as well. So I want to thank you all for your time tonight, and It looks like Steve Shoney's coming on to say something.
I just no, I know Jack. See, Jackie knew I couldn't go. I went close to 2 hours without actually opening my mouth, and I had to step in and say I want to thank the residents. This was a really important meeting for me too. I wanted to be able to sit and listen to everything, so I appreciate all the comments and frankly the time that all of you took to work through this. So that's it. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Steve. And yeah, thank you to all the residents for all your time too. We appreciate it and look forward to getting together again soon and hearing from you more. Thank you.